A 63-year-old man took in an 18-year-old homeless girl, never expecting that later the two would develop a relationship. After some time living together, they had a son. Becoming a father again close to 70, the elderly man was overjoyed. Many people even said he looked like he was rejuvenated, having a young and energetic wife who cared for him. But 10 years later, the old man deeply regretted his decision, even going so far as to dig his own grave in preparation for burial. Was it because he discovered a hidden secret about his young wife, or had she become involved with another man? The story begins in December 2013. After receiving a plea for help from 76-year-old Li Yashun, the Luoyang City television station in Hunan province quickly traveled to the town of Dazhou. At that time, Mr. Li was seen holding a hoe, digging a pit halfway up the mountain. Beside him, a 10-year-old boy cried repeatedly, at times saying that when he grew up, he would take care of his father. Seeing Mr. Li digging, villagers nearby came over to ask what was happening. To their surprise, the old man paid no attention and continued digging the grave, his face cold and expressionless. He sternly said that he was old, could no longer rely on his wife or children, and so had to dig his own grave to prepare for his funeral. As he dug, he said his greatest regret in life was taking in a young woman as his wife. If not for that, he could have enjoyed old age peacefully in his simple brick house. So why would an old man with a young wife and a child at home insist on preparing his own funeral? The story had to be traced back 13 years earlier, to the year 2000, when Mr. Li divorced his first wife. They had a daughter together, but after his ex-wife won custody, he lived alone in a small house in the village. Though life was not wealthy, it was stable, and he planned to live out his days in that way. He watched as others around him built families and careers, while he returned home alone. At first, he earned a living from farming, but as he aged, his strength faded. He had once thought being alone was fine, but now he longed for a companion to spend his old age with, someone to lean on so he wouldn't face loneliness. Unexpectedly, he married at the age of 63, and his bride was a young woman of only 18. One night, in the damp chill of the countryside, he suddenly heard strange noises outside. Having lived alone for so long, his vigilance was high, especially over his chickens, which were his most valuable property for survival. Fearing a thief, he quickly grabbed the hoe he always kept by his bed for protection, switched on his old flashlight, and cautiously stepped outside. He moved closer to the chicken coop, but instead of showing himself, he crouched into the thick grass nearby, his trembling hands using a stick to stir the bushes ahead. At first, he saw only a small, hunched figure searching for something. As he looked closer, he realized it wasn't an animal, it was a person. Before him was a young woman, not yet 20. Her clothes were torn and filthy, her hair tangled, and her face thin and worn, as though she had wandered for a long time. The scene stunned him. She didn't react to the flashlight shining on her, but only bent down, desperately eating raw eggs she had just stolen from the coop. Each egg cracked in her hands, the liquid spilling down, yet she kept eating as if she had been starving for days. The sight left him torn between fear and pity. He quickly called out, asking the girl where she had come from and what her name was. Yet in response, she only gave a vacant smile, her eyes distant as if she hadn't heard anything. Since it was already late at night, he could not go around asking for help. After thinking it over, he decided to let the girl stay in his house temporarily, planning to contact her family the next morning. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the cracks of the old wooden door, he woke up early and cooked a pot of hot porridge. Placing the bowl in front of the young girl, he gently invited her to eat. That was when he learned her name, Yang Xiaoping, 18 years old. Other than saying her name and age, she could not recall anything else clearly, nor did she know where her parents or family were. After she finished eating, the old man brought her to the village chief. Soon, word spread that Mr. Li had taken in a young girl. Seeing that her mind was unstable and she could not answer questions properly, people speculated that she had been abandoned by her family because of illness. Feeling pity for the girl's unfortunate situation, at first the villagers gave her food and water to fill her stomach. At night, they provided her with a mat and blanket so she could sleep at the village hall. The village chief also asked the police to help find her family, but they could do nothing since the girl could not provide any further clues. After a week, Yang Xiaoping seemed to have adapted to her new life, with enough food, proper clothes, and care. With no other solution, villagers suggested that someone local should take her in. Naturally, they thought of Mr. Li, who lived alone, and who was also the first to discover her. Mr. Li lived by himself in a small home. so when hearing the suggestion, he felt it made sense. Moreover, Xiaoping's eyes showed relief and comfort when she stayed with him, as if she didn't want to leave. After some thought, he agreed. He allowed the young woman, nearly 50 years younger than him, to live in his house until someone from her family came to claim her. From then on, his once silent home was filled with footsteps and the sound of her simple laughter. Mr. Li's childhood had been marked by hardships most people could not imagine. Born in a poor mountain village, he endured suffering from an early age. His father was bedridden with illness year-round, and the high cost of medicine only made the already struggling household worse. The financial burden weighed heavily on the family, casting a shadow over their home. At the very age he most needed his mother, she left, unable to bear the pressure. At that time, Li was only in middle school. Because of poverty, he was forced to quit school and take on all responsibilities at home. By day, he worked in the fields. By night, he cared for his sick father. Whenever he had spare time, he did odd jobs to earn a little more money for survival. No matter how hard he tried, a frail teenager could not stand against the storms of life. His father's condition worsened, and medicine stopped working. In the winter when Li turned 18, his father passed away. With his father gone, his mother missing, and no relatives to rely on, Li survived only by doing temporary labor jobs. But tragedy continued. The debts from his father's medical treatment became a crushing weight. When it came time to marry, no woman was willing to accept a man with nothing but debts. It wasn't until middle age that he finally married, but even then his wife left him, taking their daughter with her. When he shared his life story with the young girl, even though Xiaoping only smiled foolishly, Mr. Li felt strangely comforted. At first, he simply thought it was good to have someone in the house to keep him company, someone to talk to, or to notice if something happened to him. But over time, the presence of this naive, innocent young woman stirred emotions in the man who had lived alone for so long. What began as a temporary arrangement gradually crossed boundaries. Though he knew the age difference was vast, years of loneliness had weakened his restraint. After they began sharing the same bed, Mr. Li felt as though he had become young again. Strangely, after that turning point, their daily life grew more harmonious than before. Before long, everyone in the village knew that the 63-year-old man was living as husband and wife with the 18-year-old girl. Some even teased Mr. Li about his private life, making him rather embarrassed. And from then on, Mr. Li and Xiaoping lived together as husband and wife, even though they never held a wedding or had official marriage papers. No one expected that this improvised life would last for more than 10 years. A year later, she even gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Li Guangyu. Mr. Li had thought he would live alone for the rest of his life, but to his surprise, he now had a son. He was overjoyed and cared even more for both mother and child. But at that very time, Xiaoping's condition grew worse. Her mental state declined, and she was often in a daze. Sometimes she would laugh for no reason, then suddenly become angry, forget everyone around her, and even lash out at her own child. With no other choice, Mr. Li brought her to the village clinic. Though people had suspected she might have mental health issues, only after the diagnosis did he realize the seriousness of her illness. This type of mental disorder could only be managed with strong medication. Fearing she might harm herself or their son, Mr. Li nailed wooden boards over the windows of the hut and kept his young wife inside. Though he felt terrible doing so, he believed it was the only way to keep their child safe. Xiaoping was confined in the small hut like a caged bird, able only to watch life outside through a narrow gap, listening to the voices of people beyond the walls. Whenever music played, the young mother would happily turn and dance to the rhythm. For 10 years, aside from her daily needs, the door of the hut remained locked, never once opened. She could not remember many things, not even that she had a child. She no longer recognized herself as a mother. Mr. Li raised his son alone, and the boy grew up healthy and free of his mother's illness. This was a comfort for Mr. Li, as his son was obedient, diligent, and well-behaved. Though only 10 years old, the boy was mature beyond his age. He knew his mother was locked inside the small hut at the back of the house, and he often peeked through the cracks to look at her. On the walls of the room, he saw words his mother had carved over and over, "I want to go home." He knew she was not like other people, but he never resented her or turned away. On the contrary, he told his father that he wanted to help his mother find her way back home. He firmly believed that once she returned to the place she belonged, her illness would disappear. To him, his mother was a young, beautiful woman who could sing, dance, and be gentle. He longed for the day when she might truly recover, so she could return as the mother he always wished for. Life for the three of them went on like this until one incident changed everything. One day in 2013 at noon, Mr. Lee was bent over pulling weeds in the field when he suddenly felt dizzy, his arms and legs weak. He forced himself to take a few more swings with the hoe, but then his body gave out and he collapsed in the middle of the field. That entire afternoon, he lay unconscious until the red sunset sank behind the bamboo groves and the cold evening mist set in. Only then did he slowly regain awareness. His whole body ached, his clothes were caked in mud, and he had to hold on to tufts of grass to push himself up and drag his feet home. That incident made him realize that he had grown old and his health was failing. Before, he had thought he was still strong enough to carry the burden for many more years. But the moment he lay helpless in the fields, he understood that his time was limited. From that day on, he began to think about his own funeral and worry about the future of those he would leave behind. He had a biological daughter with his first wife, but they had not spoken in years. Their estrangement came from her disapproval of his decision to take in and live with Yang Xiaoping. She saw it as a burden and a source of shame, and from then on, father and daughter cut ties. Mr. Lee worried that if he passed away, his young wife with her illness and their small son would be left with no one to care for them. In his desperation, he thought of Xiaoping's family. If he could find her relatives and entrust her to them, he could pass away in peace, no longer fearful for the future of his wife and son. He asked the village authorities for help and contacted a television program called Searching for Family, hoping they could trace her origins. After many questions from reporters, Xiaoping finally managed to say a name, Yang Guoqing, her father. In the interviews, Mr. Lee's sadness was clear. His eyes were sunken, showing fatigue. But the way he avoided some questions, speaking vaguely, gave many the feeling that he still carried a hidden secret he could not reveal. Unfortunately, despite the efforts of reporters and police, no concrete information could be found. It wasn't until the program aired that the Yang family recognized their daughter on television. Relatives rushed to Mr. Lee's home and asked to take her back, but the old man firmly refused. His reason was that he wanted her family to also take the young boy, knowing he was too old to raise him. But the Yang family refused. The one who came to fetch Xiaoping was her brother. He looked around the modest home and noted that although life there was poor and difficult, his sister at least had someone who truly cared for her. He revealed that their family had 3 siblings, and Xiaoping was the youngest. Since childhood, she had shown signs of mental instability, sometimes even lashing out uncontrollably. When she went missing, the family searched for a while but found nothing, and eventually gave up, not even reporting it to the police. After much discussion, the 2 sides agreed that Xiaoping would stay with Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee also asked his wife's brother to promise to take in both Xiaoping and their son if he himself passed away. From then on, the small rural house became the shelter for an unusual family bound together by fate. As time passed, Mr. Lee turned 80 while his son continued school. Though his back was bent and his hair white, Mr. Lee still worked hard to provide for his wife and child. According to reporters, after the family's story aired, local authorities began to provide special support. Thanks to this, although life remained difficult, the struggles eased somewhat, allowing the 3 of them to keep going together. With government and village committee help, the family was given a new 2-story home and recognized as a low-income household, receiving a monthly subsidy of 1050 yuan, around 150 USD. Yang Xiaoping also received treatment, and her condition somewhat improved, but she did not want to return to her biological family. In 2021, the old television episode resurfaced on social media. The headline, "A 76-year-old man and his 29-year-old wife walking together in loyalty," immediately sparked heated debate. Some argued that Mr. Lee's relationship with a very young woman suffering from mental illness without legal marriage papers was inappropriate. To them, this was not a touching story but a violation of law. Others defended Mr. Lee, saying that if he had not taken her in back then, Xiaoping might have died on the streets. Moreover, throughout their years together, he had always cared for her and had repeatedly asked for help in finding her family. According to Chinese law, individuals with severe mental illness who cannot make independent decisions are considered legally equivalent to minors under 14. Therefore, the concepts of consent or voluntary choice do not apply. Under the law, this made the case even more complex and sensitive. Through the program and ongoing discussions, many questions remained. Her hometown was more than 300 kilometers, over 180 miles away. How could a young woman with mental illness have wandered such a distance on her own? Some suspected she may have been a victim of traffickers and, for some reason, ended up in Mr. Lee's village. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe to follow more unusual and thought-provoking stories. Your support is the motivation for us to bring even more unique and captivating stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.